degree of BSc Agronomy. So this day I'm going to discuss about the finance and development back to pieces economic concepts explained. So what is capitalism? So when we talk about capitalism, it often thought as an economic system in which private actors owned and controlled property in accord with their interest, and demand and supply fairly set prices in markets in a way that can serve the best interests of society. So kung yung capitalism, it is a economic system in which ang mga private actors own and control property in accord with their interest. So next is pillars of capitalism. Capitalism is founded on the following pillars: private property, self-interest, a market mechanism, competition, freedom to choose with respect to consumption. So when we talk about private property, which allows people to own tangible assets such as land and houses, and intangible assets such as stocks and bonds. So when I talk about self-interest, through which people act in pursuit of their own good without regard for socio-political pressure. Then competition, through firms' freedom to enter and exit market, maximize social welfare. That is the joint welfare of both producers and consumers. Then freedom to choose with respect consumption. It is the production and investment. Dissatisfied consumers can buy different products. Investor can pursue more lucrative ventures. Workers can leave their job for better pay. And the last is the limited role of government. So when you talk about limited role of government, it is to protect the rights of private citizen and maintain an orderly environment that facilitates proper functioning of markets. Then next is macro, the economic divide. So when we talk about microeconomics, it is actually concerned with how an overall economic work, and also it studies such things such as employment, gross domestic product, and also inflation, the stuff of news stories, and government policy debate. So kung mingon ta og microeconomics, it is actually concerned how supply and demand interact in individual markets for goods and services. Because when you talk about microeconomic, it is examination of the behavior of individual consumers and firm, and it is divided into consumers demand theory, production theory, and related topics such as the nature of market competition. So competition, economic welfare, the role of imperfect information in economic outcomes, and also at the most abstract general equilibrium, which does simultaneously with many markets. So moto ang macroeconomics. Next is the economic model, simulation of reality. So when we talk about modern economy, it is a complex machine, and its job is to allocate limited resources and distribute the resulting output among a large number of agents, mainly individuals, firms, and governments, which allowing for the possibility that each agent's actions can directly affect other agents' action. So, mato ang the modern economy. So, next is the interpreting reality. So, interpreting reality. An economic model is simplified destruction of reality because it is designed to yield hypotheses about economic behavior that can be tested, and it is an important feature of an economic model just because that it is necessarily subjective in design because there are no objective measures for economic outcomes. Different economists will make different judgments about what is needed to explain their interpretations reality. In fact, in the interpreting reality, there are two broad classes of economic model: theoretical and empirical. So when we talk about a theoretical model, actually it seeks to derive a verifiable implication about economic behavior under the assumption that agents maximize a specific objective subject to constraints that are well defined in the model. And also this theoretical model, it also provides qualitative answers to specific questions such as the implication of asymmetric information or how best to handle market failures. Next, in the empirical model, so every empirical model will also have coefficient that determines how a dependent variable changes when an input changes. Next is the how economists build empirical models. Actually, when we talk about how economic builds empirical models, empirical economic models have features in common, and each will allow for inputs or exogenous variable which do not need to be explained by the model. And also these economists these also include policy variables such as government spending and tax rates, or non-policy variables. Then they are the output called dependent variable. So next is the econometrics making theory count. So when talk about economic making theory count, it is for economic theory to be useful tool for policy making. It must be quantifiable. So economic model to explain consistently recurring relationship their model link one or more economic variables to other economic variables. For examples, economists connect the amount individuals spend or consumers go to disposable income and wealth, and expect consumption to increase as disposable income or wealth increase. Then that is the relationship is positive. So next is the econometrics convert theoretical economic model into useful tools for economic policy making. So theoretical econometric relies heavily on mathematics, theoretical statistics, and numerical method to prove that the new procedures have the ability to draw correct inferences. Actually, the applied econometricians use econometric techniques in order to develop the theories to translate qualitative economic statement into quantitative ones, because applied econometricians are closer to data because they often run into an alert theoretical counterparts to data attributes to lead to problem with existing estimation techniques. So next is the testing the hypothesis. So yung testing the hypothesis, it is the main tool of the fourth stage is hypothesis testing, a formal statistical procedure during which the researcher makes a specific statement about the true value of economic parameter, and a statistical test determines whether the estimated parameter is consistent with that hypothesis. Next is the supply demand Y market tech. So when we talk about supply demand Y market takes, it is actually when buyers and sellers get together, or the key outcome is a price force. For the economist, market is determined by how supply and demand come together to determine a price. Then as supply and demand are in turn determined by technology and conditions under which people operate. So then next is the perfect competition. So may tag perfect competition, it is the most fundamental, in which these are large numbers of identical suppliers and demanders of the same products. Then buyers and sellers can find one another at no cost, and no barriers prevent new suppliers from entering the market. Because in perfect competition, no one has the ability to affect prices. Both sides take the market price as a given, and the market clearing price is one at which there is neither excess supply nor excess demand. Because in a perfect competition, the higher the price, the more suppliers are likely to produce, and conversely, buyers tend to purchase more or a product the lower price. Because the relationship between supply and demand for good or services are changes in prices called the elasticity. Next is the barriers to competition. So may tag barriers to competition, there is in monopoly situation, there usually is a buyer, natural or legal, to potential competitors. Then government usually regulates such monopolies to ensure that they do not abuse their market's power by setting prices too high. Then next next is how economies function. So what is direct investment? So direct is, according to Hughes, Galiza, and James Chance, investors are often seek profits from a long-term stake in a foreign operations. Then foreign investors, so kung may tawag foreign investor, foreign investors can have myriad motivations for seeking to earn profits in another country, but they have fundamentally two core choices when deciding how to deploy their capital. Then phases of investment. So phases in investment, a number of factors influence a company decision to engage in direct investment, including analysis of the trade costs with a foreign country, and if this costs, including tariff, trade barriers such as quotas and transportations, are higher than the cost, including the cost of production abroad or establishing presence in the foreign country. The business will maximize its profit through direct investments. The next is the attracting direct investment. And attracting direct investment advanced economies attract direct investment because of their stable policies, pool of skilled workers, and sizable markets. Then developing economics are more interested in greenfield investments, which creates new facilities and jobs. Then also governments must often set up a special economic zone, provide the property for construction of facilities, and offer generous tax incentives or subsidies to attract capital. So next is the money at the center of transactions. So money at the center of transactions. So money may take the world go around, as the song says, and most people in the world probably have handled money, many of them on a daily basis. But despite its familiarity, probably few people could tell you exactly what money is or how it works. Then, according to Arena Asmonson and Sida Honor, that without it, modern economies could not functions. Then, in short, money can be anything that can serve as a unit of account, unit as first is the store of value, unit of account, and medium of exchange. Kung yung tag store of value, it means when people conceive it and use it later. Then unit of account, it is provide a common base for prices. And also, and the last one is the medium of exchange. It is something that people can use to buy and sell from one another. Then next is the price, the language of exchange. So price, the language of exchange. So according to Arena Asmonson, a price is the amount of money a buyer give a seller in exchange for a good or service, but it can be more than that. So actually, the most basic is a price is the amount of money that a buyer give to seller in exchange for good or services. So next is the inflation prices on the risk. So yung tag inflation prices on the risk, according to Saida Honor, that inflation measures how much more expensive a set of goods and services has become over a certain period, usually a year. And yung tag inflation prices on the price, inflation has plunged countries into long period of instability, because when you talk about inflation, it is the rate of increase in price over a given period of time. Typically, it is a broad measure such as the overall increase in prices or the increase in the cost of living in a country, but it can also be more narrowly calculated for certain goods such as food or for services such as a haircut, for example, because inflation represents how much more expensive the relevant set of goods and or services has become over a certain period, most commonly a year. And also, although high inflation hurt in economy, deflation or falling prices is not desirable either. When prices are falling, actually consumers delay making purchase, and if they can then anticipating lower price in the future for the economy, this meant less economic activity, distribution to supply. Then is the unemployment curse of joblessness. So according to say the owner, uh, the number of people at work is generally closely related to whether an economy is growing at a reasonable growth. So when I talk about unemployment, it is a highly dependent on economic activity. In fact, growth and unemployment can be two of as two sides of same coin. When economic activity is high, more production happens overall and more people are needed to produce the higher amount of goods and services. And when economic activity is low, actually the firms cut jobs and unemployment rises. In that sense, unemployment is counter-cyclical, and meaning that it is rises when economic growth is low, and vice versa. And back in the depths of the global financial crisis in 2009, the International Labour Office announced that global unemployment had reached the highest level on record. More than 200 million people, 7% of global workforce, were looking for jobs in 2009. Next is the fiscal policy, taking and giving away. So according to Mark Horton and Asma El Ganini, governments promote stable and sustainable growth through their power to spend and tax. Then fiscal policy. So when I talk about fiscal policy, fiscal policy influence the economy through government in spending and taxation, typically to promote strong and sustainable growth and reduce poverty. The role and objective of fiscal policy gained prominence during the global economic crisis, when many governments stepped in to support financial system, jumpstart growth, and protect vulnerable groups from the impact of the crisis. And how does fiscal policy? So when we talk about fiscal policy, it is actually measured employed by government to stabilize the economy. Then fiscal measures are frequently used in tandem with monetary policy to achieve a certain goals. Then how does next is the how does next is the how does fiscal policy works. So question is, how does fiscal policy work? So through through the fiscal policy, the government of a country controls the flow of tax revenues and public expenditure to navigate the economy. Then, if the government receives more revenues than it spends, and actually it runs a surplus. While if it is spent more than the tax and non-tax receipt, then it runs a deficit. So next is the externalities. Prices do not capture all cost. So according to Thomas Helbling, there are different between private returns or cost and the cost or returns to society and it is according to Thomas Helbling. Consumption, production, and investment. So when we talk about consumption, production, and investment, it is the decision of individuals, households, and firms often affect people not directly involved in that transaction. And sometimes these indirect effects are tiny, but when they are large, they can become problematic. What economics call externalities, because when we talk about externalities, are among the main reason government intervene in the economics sphere. Then negative and positive externalities. So a negative and positive externalities. So sa negative externality, it totally occurs when a cost spill over. Then a positive externality, it occurs when a benefit spills over. Then so externalities occur when someone of the cost or benefits of transaction fall on the someone other than the producer or the consumers. Next is the international trade commerce among nations. So according to Brad McDonald, that nations are almost always better off when they buy and sell from one another. So this is how McDonald. It is according to Brad McDonald. Next is the so why countries trade? So why is countries trade? So countries trade with each other when on their countries trade with each other when on their own they do not have sources or capacity to satisfy their own need and wants. By developing and exploiting their domestic scarce resources, country can produce a surplus and trade this for the resources they need. Then next is capital accounts liberalized or not. So according to M.I. Han, Gunsi, and Iswar Prasad, there are both benefits and costs to easing restrictions on capital that flows across countries' borders, and it is according to M.I. Han, Gunsi, and Iswar Prasad. So what accounts for the surge of cross-border capital flows over the past 2.5 decades? Capital account liberalization, that is easing restrictions on capital flows across a country's borders, provide a big part of the answer. But while the increase in this flows since the middle 1990s, both between industrial countries and from industrial to developing countries, has been associated with a number of benefits. It also played a role in a number of financial crises. So building the capital account. So mayroon tag building capital account. The capital account in a country balance of payment covers a variety of financial flows. mainly foreign direct investment, uh, parent then portfolio flows, and bank borrowing, which have in common the acquisition of assets in a country by residents of another, and it is possible in people to control these flows by placing restrictions of flows going through capital channels. Then next is the reason to control capital flows. So reason to control capital flows, control on capital account transaction represent a country's attempt to shield itself from risk associated with fluctuation in international capital flows. So when we talk about capital controls, take an special significance in the context of a fixed exchange rate regime. In maintaining such a regime can be made more difficult by unfettered capital flows. Then next is the manakwa ni balik akong slides. Next is the finance. So next is the next is the finance. So kung inon taog finance, it is the specialized branch of economics concerned with the origination and management of money, credit, and banking and investment. So next is the kung inon tag finance, it is actually concerned branch of economic concerned with the origination and management of money, credit, banking, and investment. Then banks at the heart of the matter. So according to Jen Gubat institution that much of savers and borrowers help ensure the economy's function smoothly. So the primary role of bank is to take in funds called deposit from those with money, pull them and lend them to those who need funds. And also banks are intermediaries between depositors who lend money to bank and the borrowers to whom the bank lends money. The amount banks pay for deposit and the income they receive on the loans are both called interest. And also a bank's most important role a bank's most important role may be matching up creditors and borrowers, but banks are also essential to domestic and international payment systems, and they create money. Then and also banks also play a central role in the transmission of monetary policy because it is one of the government most important tools for achieving economic growth without inflation. Then the central banks also controls the money supply at the national level, while banks facilitate the flow of money in the market within which they operate. So banks have several ways of making money besides pocketing the difference or spread between the interest they pay on deposit and borrowed money and the interest they collect from borrowers or securities they hold. They can earn money from income from securities they trade, and Then fees for customer service such as checking accounts, financial and investment banking, loan servicing, and the origination. Next is what are money markets. So according to Randall Todd, they provide a means for lenders and borrowers to satisfy their short-term financial needs. So, it is according to Randall Todd. So may ko so tag money markets, it is provide those with funds, banks, money managers, and retail investor, and means for safe, liquid, short-term investment, and the often borrowers. Banks, broker-dealers, hedge funds, and non-financial operations access to low-cost fund. Because the term money market, it is an umbrella because it covers several types of secured transactions which vary according to the needs of the lenders and borrowers. And next is the market exchange or over the counter. So according to Randall Todd, how securities are traded plays a critical role in price determination and stability, and it is according to Randall Todd. Then financial market. So when we talk about financial market, it is a market in which people trade financial securities and derivatives at low transaction cost. Because the term market, it is sometimes used for what are most strictly exchange organization that facilitate the trade in financial securities. For example, stock exchange or commodity exchange. Then trading on an exchange. So when we talk about trading on an exchange is a term used to describe a trade that is taking place directly on the other book of an exchange. It differs from trading over the counter, which are contrast exchange between two parties away from a centralized exchange. Because one way to trade on exchange is through direct market access. Then trading over the counter. So trading over the counter market is an over-the-counter market is a decentralized market in which market participants trade stocks, commodities, currencies, or other instruments directly between two parties and without a central exchange or border. Because of this, liquidity in the OTC market may come at a premium. Next is the economic in action. Then financial service getting the goods. So when you talk about financial service, it is not the financial good itself. Says amortized loan to loan by a house or a car insurance policy, but ang financial service something that is best described as the process of acquiring the financial good. So acquiring the financial good. In the other words, ang financial service it involves the transaction required to obtain the financial good. Then the financial sectors also covers many different types of transaction in such areas as real estate, consumer finance, banking, and insuring. It also covers a broad spectrum of investment funding, including securities. Then, next is how according to Erana Asmundsson, how consumers and business acquire financial goods such as loans and insurance, and it is according to Erana Asmundsson. Next is the strategic thinking. So strategic thinking. So strategic is thinking. So according to Sarwat Jahan and Abnid Saber Mahmood, game theory analyzes behavior when decision must take into account the potential action of opponents. So when we talk about strategic thinking, it is the mental ability and conscious planning, taking into cognizance the available resources that will assess an individual or organization to make an optimal decision, while economic thinking, it is improving the economic resources to achieve set goals or organizational objectives. And next is taxes and price. According to Rudy Moji and Michael Keane, it is hard to design, offer, an efficient revenue system. So, then personal income. So, when you talk about personal income, it is a personal income tax that it taxes people on an indicator of their ability to pay and can collect progressively more from those with a higher income. Then capital income conundrum. When we talk about capital income conundrum, capital income, interest, dividends, and capital gain, and it is in most countries received largely by the better off. High taxes on capital income or on the underlying wealth are therefore often viewed as a good way to address inequities. But theory offers further perspective on this issue. So when you talk about capital income, it enables consumption in the future because taxing it increases the cost in terms of consumption per gan today. Then prudent people who prefer to postpone consumption or transfer it to their heirs will be taxed more than those who do not. Then some says this is a violation of horizontal equity, the principle of that those who are in all relevant respect identical should be treated the same on the grounds that the same preference it is not a legitimate based on which to different tax liabilities. Next is the tax principles. So taxing principles. Taxing principles, according to Rudy Moji and Michael Keane, making the best of necessary evil. It is according to Rudy Moji and Michael Keane. Then Then next is the inflation targeting, holding the line. So according to Sarwajaham, central banks use interest rates to steer price increases towards a public publicly announced goal. So why inflation targeting? So inflation targets why inflation targeting? Because it allows central banks to respond to shock to the domestic economy and focus on domestic consideration. And also the stable inflation uh, reduces investors' uncertainty because it allows investors to predict changes in interest rates and anchors inflation expectation. That's why inflation targeting, because it is targeting because it allows central banks to respond to shock to the domestic economy and focus on domestic consideration. Next is the how does inflation targeting work? So how does inflation targeting work? So inflation targeting, it is a monetary policy where a central bank follows an explicit target for the inflation rate for the medium term and announces this inflation target to the public. An inflation target set above will raise or lower interest rates based on above target or below target inflation, then it respectively. Then next is the what are the remittances? So kumingon ta og remittances, it is a payment of money that is transferred to another party. However, the term is mostly used nowadays to describe a sum of money sent by someone working abroad on his or her family. Then this term is derived from the word remit. Ang remit, it means to send back. So according to the Dilibrata, that for many countries, many transfers for citizens working abroad are a lifeline for development. So this is how it is according to Dilibrata. So that's all. Thank you. Goodbye and God bless.